My name is Madeline Clark. I was kicked out of my parents' house on my 31st birthday, without a single happy birthday, just a small cake I bought for myself and a suitcase they had already packed in advance. After years of shouldering the family's financial burdens, I was met with silence and a cruel sentence. You've freeloaded long enough. Have you ever been turned away by the people you loved most, as if you had never even existed? If this story touches something inside you, don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments and follow the channel to hear more real journeys like this. Because that night, when I pulled my suitcase out of the house I once called home, I had no idea I was about to uncover something far more devastating. I stepped into the room I used to call mine, the door giving a soft creak as I closed it behind me. That sound echoed like a full stop. Outside, sunlight filtered through the thin curtain, turning the dust on my old vanity into a muted gold. In my hands was a tiny birthday cake, the only thing I bought for myself that day. I placed it on the table next to the suitcase that had already been laid out, neat and ready, as if they had already planned the exact moment I was meant to leave. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my feet brushing the worn carpet, my hands still trembling slightly. Not out of fear, but pain. A pain that didn't scream or shout. It drained me quietly, like a deep cold seeping into the marrow of my bones. I knew this day would come, I just didn't think it would be today. The past few months, the air in the house had turned glacial. My father, Robert, spoke even less than usual. My mother, Eileen, only looked at me when she needed something done. No more dinner table small talk, awkward as it had been. No more cups of tea left for me at night. Everything had been shrinking, fading, going cold. I felt myself being erased from this place, little by little. Still, I stayed. Because I thought, maybe if I tried a little harder, they'd see me again like they used to. The daughter who was diligent, thoughtful, dependable, always willing to step back. If I helped a little more, covered the water bill this month, picked up Mom's new prescription, paid the car insurance for my brother Troy, maybe they'd remember I was still a part of this family. I was wrong. I bent down and unzipped the suitcase. Everything was already packed. A few of my regular outfits, my old toothbrush, a small journal I used to keep hidden under my pillow. My entire life folded into a single fabric box. I began quietly moving around the room, picking up a few more things I wanted to keep. Some old college photos, the pair of shoes I'd saved up for over a month to buy, the book Mom gave me when I was in 5th grade. She used to smile more back then. She used to hold me when I had bad dreams. That was a long time ago. I walked over to the desk, opened the drawer to find my backup hard drive, and noticed an old yellow envelope tucked beneath a stack of papers. There was no label on the front. I hesitated, then picked it up and opened it. Inside were medical bills, but they weren't mine. They were my mother's. Mental health treatment costs. 4 consecutive years. I flipped through them, seeing prescription orders, a breakdown of therapy sessions, all charged to a credit card under my name. I didn't remember ever letting her use it, but the consent signature was mine, clear as day. I froze. They had used my name, my credit card, my trust, quietly, secretly. I thought I was helping them through a hard time, but in truth, they had chosen to exploit me, and I never saw it coming. A soft thump downstairs snapped me out of it. Probably Troy coming home, or Dad restocking beer bottles on the shelf, like always. I slipped the envelope into the inner pocket of my bag. My hands were ice cold. I sat down again, this time opening my laptop. The screen glowed pale blue on my face. My fingers moved on autopilot. I logged into the utility portals, power, water, internet. Bills I had been paying every month out of my night shift wages, from the desk job I had held down for the past 4 years since leaving Pittsburgh after the crash. That night, when my car slid off the mountainside in the rain, it took more than my job with it. It destroyed the career I had worked so hard to build. I survived, but I lost everything. And when I came back here, my parents were the only people I thought I could still rely on. They told me to rest, that I needed time. I believed them. Then 1 month passed, then 2, then 3. I started paying the utility bill. Just this once, I told myself. Then the insurance. Mom's medication, the roof repair. They'll pay me back. But eventually, I stopped waiting. I just kept paying. Like it was my duty. Like it was what a good daughter does. But the truth was, they never intended to give anything back. And they never planned to keep me. One by one, I canceled every account in my name. Power, water, internet, cable, Troy's car insurance. Each click felt like snipping an invisible thread binding me to this place. Each confirm pop-up answered the silent question that had haunted me for years. Was I ever really considered part of this family? No. No! No! The screen showed one final message. Your account has been successfully closed. I shut the laptop. My heart was still pounding. Every beat heavy. But next to it, something else was beginning to grow. Calm. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't hoping anymore. I stood up and stretched. The air in the room felt different. The biting cold that had filled it all night seemed to ease a little. I pulled out the small bag from under the bed and checked everything one last time. Passport, documents, cash. I was leaving, and this time I wouldn't look back. Downstairs, the TV was still on. A laugh track echoed, a fake laugh from some rerun comedy, rising faintly up the stairs like a distant, irrelevant memory. I heard my dad scolding Troy about leaving the beer can open. Mom's voice was faint, rambling as usual. I slipped on my shoes. The wind outside pushed through the window frame, carrying the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. I stepped to the door, my hand on the knob. And I knew, from this moment on, everything would be different. I would no longer be the name they called when a bill needed paying. I would no longer be the shadow drifting through an old house, hoping to one day be seen. I had done enough, paid enough, and now I was choosing to walk away, not because I gave up, because I finally understood. Family isn't where you're held hostage by guilt. It's where you're free to be whole. And I, Madeline Clark, would no longer ask permission to live my own life. I left that house just before midnight. No one walked me out. No one asked, "Where are you going?" or simply, "Are you okay?" The living room light still glowed through the thin curtains. The old recliner still leaned to one side, the way my dad always sat when drinking beer. The TV was still on. An old movie was playing, and no one was really watching. I rolled my suitcase down the cracked cement steps, the wheels clicking softly. My tote bag carried my laptop and a few personal things. The wind was sharp through my light coat, but I didn't feel cold. I felt light in a strange way. My car, parked at a friend's house down the street, was already waiting. I didn't want to leave it out front tonight. I didn't want them to see me leave and pretend to care. I thought, maybe if I slipped away quietly, they'd finally notice the space I once filled. But I understood now, they wouldn't notice anything. Erica's apartment was only about 15 minutes away. I'd been there a few times since she moved back to Cedar Glen to work at the town's medical clinic. Erica was one of the few old friends who stayed in touch after the crash. We'd gone to high school together, then taken different paths. But somehow, through all the detours, we'd found our way back to each other. When I called to ask if I could crash for a while, she didn't ask questions. She just said, "Come, you'll always have a place here." Erica opened the door after I knocked 3 times. Same red, wavy hair pulled into a loose bun, her face a little thinner than the last time I saw her. She wore a long-sleeved t-shirt and pajama pants with coffee mugs printed on them. She still looked like she always did, simple and warm. "Come in, it's late," she said. "Thank you," I replied, my voice catching in my throat. Her apartment was small but tidy, filled with the warm scent of beeswax and cinnamon. She made me a cup of tea, handed me a light blanket and an old hoodie. We sat on the couch, two women in the dark, sharing silence like it was its own kind of language. I told Erica everything. No filters, no softening, no skipping over the pain. I told her about the birthday cake, the pre-packed suitcase, the therapy bills in my name. When I got to the part where I canceled every account, Erica nodded gently. "You did the right thing," she said calmly. "Right and brave." We sat in silence for a while, then Erica got up, disappeared into another room, and came back with a thick envelope. She placed it on the table and slid it toward me. I looked at her, hesitant. "What is it?" "Money your mom borrowed from me," Erica said softly. $10,000. She said it was for your grad school in Boston, but you never went to Boston, did you? I froze. I had never set foot in Boston, and I'd never even heard of that money. I kept it, thought one day you should know. Not because of the money, she added, but because of the truth. I opened the envelope. Inside were wire transfer copies, a handwritten IOU from my mother, even printed out messages between them. My mom had written, "She doesn't know anything. I'll handle it. When she's stable, I'll tell her to pay you back." Didn't know, no consent, no explanation. In that moment, what I felt wasn't sadness anymore. It was a cold clarity. All these years, I'd carried the burden quietly, thinking it was love, duty, the kind of sacrifice needed to hold a family together. But the truth was, they chose to use me as a resource. A walking wallet. A compliant daughter who never asked questions. I folded the envelope, pressing it flat between both palms like sealing off a chapter of my past. Erica looked at me, not with pity, not with sorrow, but with the deep empathy of someone who had endured and moved on. "What will you do next?" she asked softly. I looked up at her. "I don't know yet," I said slowly. "But this time, I won't stay silent." Erica nodded. No more questions. We cleaned up and went to bed. The guest room was small but cozy. I lay down on the unfamiliar bed, the soft blanket wrapping around me like a late comfort. Outside the window, wind rustled through the trees, brushing against the thin glass. I left the nightlight on. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without jolting awake. And when I woke up the next morning, in a place without yelling, without hidden debt, without coldness disguised as duty, I knew I was starting over. No one led me here, no one held me back. Bought myself here. And this time, I would be the one to walk myself out of that old place. No turning back, no waiting for them to see my worth. Because maybe I should have seen it myself a long time ago. 3 days after I moved in with Erica, rumors began to spread around Cedar Glen. At first, it was whispers in the laundromat. "The Clark girl ran off. Heard she had a mental breakdown. Her mom's been crying her eyes out. Poor woman." Then at the grocery store, "Did you see Robert yesterday? Face all red, ranting about how she betrayed the family." Every whisper had one thing in common. I was the ungrateful, selfish daughter who turned her back on her aging parents. I wasn't surprised. I'd lived with them long enough to know the most dangerous weapon in that house wasn't the yelling. It was the way they rewrote the story to make themselves the heroes. Still, something stung in my chest when Erica read aloud a message from a former high school friend. "What's wrong with Maddie? Why'd she just leave home like that? Her parents are good people." I didn't respond. Just tightened my grip on the tea in my hands. Erica watched me for a moment, then quietly set her phone down. "You okay?" she asked gently. I nodded, but deep down, a hollow disappointment gnawed at me. Not because they believed my parents' version, but because after all these years of being decent, generous, helpful, all it took was a few words from Robert for the whole town to turn its back on me. That evening, I decided to take a walk around the town square for some air. The autumn chill was settling in, dry leaves drifting along the brick path. The streetlights cast a warm golden glow through the trees, stirring memories of childhood festivals, when I still believed my dad was a hero. I walked slowly along a chipped white fence, then turned down the narrow path behind the church, where there was a small park often empty at night. I was just about to sit on the stone bench when I heard a familiar voice up ahead. She really left? After all these years? Just because of some misunderstanding? I froze. It was my father. He was standing with a group, maybe 3 or 4 people, near the caramel apple booth at the early fall fair. He wore his old leather jacket, a beer can in hand, his face flushed. He wasn't yelling, but his voice was loud enough to be heard by anyone nearby. We sacrificed everything for her, fed her, paid for college, and now she disappears. Like we're trash. A woman, probably one of my mom's friends, clicked her tongue. So sad. Kids these days have no heart. I took a step back, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to step into the light, call him out, expose the lies. But the other part knew. This wasn't the time. I turned away and walked briskly toward the far side of the park. I didn't cry. Just felt cold. Like my body had no more space left for pain. On the way back, I happened to pass a group of people chatting near the scented candle stand. They spoke in hushed tones, but I heard enough. She carried that whole family for years. I saw Maddie juggling 2, 3 jobs. I remember. It was her up fixing the Clark roof last year in the rain. Robert just sat there drinking, yelling at the contractor. Now he's saying she left because she's unstable? Doesn't sit right with me. I stopped behind a tree. Those words weren't full-on defense, but they were flickers of light in a black sky. At least someone remembered. At least someone saw. When I got back to the apartment, Erica was folding laundry on the couch. She saw my face and immediately set the stack down. What happened? I told her everything. The fair, my dad's words, the group at the candle booth. Erica didn't speak right away. She got up, poured me a glass of water, and sat across from me, elbows on her knees. You can't control what they say, she said, but you can choose when to speak. I looked at her, eyes searching through her words, touching something restless deep within me. I don't even know where to begin. Start with the truth, she replied. But you don't always have to say it right away. Sometimes, let them show their true colors first. I sat in a daze for a while. My father's face floated to the surface of my thoughts. The way he spun a story where he was always the victim. My mother's face, those red, teary eyes I once believed came from love and hurt. Now I wasn't so sure if it was real or performed. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, eyes wide open. Outside, the wind hissed through the cracks in the door, creating a rhythmic sound like the whisper of memories. And in those whispers, I heard something loud and clear. It was time. I would no longer let them rewrite the story of my life in their own words. If anyone was going to tell it, it would be me. And I wouldn't speak with rage or hatred. I would speak with the truth. Clear, raw, and undeniable. Not for revenge, but for survival, to move forward, so no one else would have to suffer in silence like I once did. The next morning, I sat alone in Erica's small kitchen, cradling a warm cup of coffee as the morning light slid through the window slats, casting pale golden streaks across the wooden table. The faint scent of toast hung in the air, but I wasn't hungry. One thought looped through my mind since waking up. I needed to know more. I needed to face everything I'd once avoided. I grabbed my laptop and opened the old email account, the one I used to store bills, letters, and documents I once thought would never matter. I created a new folder and titled it The Truth. I began piecing together every scattered fragment of a story I'd never dared to look at fully before. Utility bills in my name, the invoice for the roof repair, Troy's auto insurance contract, bank statements. Every file, every line of numbers was proof of what I'd done that no one ever acknowledged. While combing through the bank transfer logs, I accidentally opened an old email from 2 years ago. The subject line read simply, "Emergency loan, confirm again." I vaguely remembered the time Mom said I needed to sign an authorization to make it easier to transfer money for medication. I signed it without asking more. Inside the email was a PDF attachment, loan paperwork totaling $12,500 under my name with a forged signature. I felt like someone had wrapped their fingers around my heart and squeezed. Just as I sat stunned, a knock came at the door. I jumped, heart racing. Erica wasn't home. She was working the morning shift. I walked to the window, pulled back the curtain. It was Mrs. Langford. Our old neighbor from next to my parents' house, a woman in her late 60s who used to bring over cookies during the holidays. I opened the door. "Hello, Maddie," she said softly. "I'm sorry to drop by unannounced, but I think you should know a few things." I invited her in, made an extra cup of tea, and we sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed me a small paper bundle tied with a worn ribbon. I opened it and found a few color photos, some clippings from the old town paper, and, most startling, a handwritten note that read, "Never let the girl find out." "I'm not sure you should see these," Mrs. Langford said slowly, "but after hearing your father talk at the market a few days ago, I just couldn't stay silent anymore." I flipped through each piece of paper, each image. One was a snapshot of a 1997 local news article. The headline was small but clear. "Officer Robert Clark suspended after assault allegation." I had never known about this. Dad always said he left the force because he couldn't stand the politics. Assaulting someone? That was never mentioned. Mom never breathed a word. "Back then, the whole town stayed quiet out of fear," Mrs. Langford sighed. "He was the police chief. Who would speak up?" I was speechless, my eyes glued to the article's details. The victim was a 17-year-old boy, detained on suspicion of car theft, later found to have no evidence against him. My father beat him in the holding room so badly he ended up hospitalized. The case was dropped when the plaintiff unexpectedly withdrew. No apology, no consequences. The room seemed to tilt around me. "I think you deserve to know," Mrs. Langford said gently, "because what's happening in your family isn't just about parent-child arguments. There are things that have been buried for a long time." I nodded faintly, saying nothing. She stood up and placed a hand on my shoulder, light as wind. "I believe you'll know what to do." After she left, I sat still for a long time. Holding the old photograph in my hands, I looked at the young face of my father in uniform. Strong, proud. But now that I knew the truth, I couldn't unsee the darkness in his eyes. I called Erica. When she came home, I showed her everything Mrs. Langford had brought. She read through every line, every image in silence. Finally, she exhaled and laid the bundle on the table. "Maddie," she said, "your parents built an entire world of lies to live in. But now, every crack is showing." I nodded. Everything was clear now. The question wasn't whether I should speak up, but when and how. That night, I started planning, not to get revenge, but to tell my story. Clearly, with evidence, with counterpoints. I wouldn't let them keep painting me as the unstable one, the betrayer, the ungrateful child. I reopened my laptop and created a new folder next to the truth. I named it proof. And I began to write. Not with tears, but with precision, line by line, detail by detail, no more trembling, no more fear. Because for the first time, I knew. I wasn't wrong. I had just been silent for far too long. It took me 3 nights to finish the first draft, not because it was too long, but because every sentence forced me to pause and breathe. What I wrote wasn't just memory, it was shards of the past I had buried deep because they hurt, because they were shameful, because no one would have believed me if I had said them out loud. But this time I wrote with nothing left to hide, not to accuse, but to tell the whole story in my voice. I started with the simple things: utility bills, screenshots of transfers, roof repair receipts, Troy's auto insurance policy with my signature, then the messages with my mom. Sweet on the surface, but deeply manipulative. Like how she coaxed me into signing off on that important family loan, then vanished once the money cleared. Then came the documents from Mrs. Langford, the old news report about Dad, and that letter. Never let the girl find out. I organized everything chronologically, attached photos, added notes. Every item, every piece of proof reminded me of a forgotten version of myself. The 24-year-old girl who stayed up all night freelancing online, then drove mom to a heart appointment at dawn. The 27-year-old who had just paid off her student loan, only to drain her savings for 4 new tires for her brother during winter. It was all real. It was all erased. When I typed the last sentence, I didn't feel relief, just calm. As if I had finally closed a door that had been swinging open for years, letting in a cold wind, now finally locked. Erica stepped into the room as I was double-checking everything. "You're really gonna post it?" she asked, concern flickering in her eyes. I turned to her, my gaze no longer hesitant. Yeah, not to tear them down, but to remind myself that what I went through was real, and I'm not crazy. She nodded slowly, then stood quietly beside me as I clicked post. My story went live on Facebook at 9 o'clock on a cold, dry Monday morning in Cedar Glen. I didn't expect it to go viral. I just wanted to speak my truth. But I was wrong. Within just 2 hours, there were already more than 80 shares. Messages started pouring in from old classmates, former neighbors, even people I couldn't remember by name. I always wondered why she stayed in that house for so long. I remember seeing Maddie shoveling snow all day from early morning to night. Her dad just stood on the porch smoking. I work at the pharmacy. I saw her pay for her mom's meds with her own card. Each comment felt like a beam of light cutting through the isolation I once thought no one could see. Turns out, some people had seen. They were just too afraid to speak, just like I once was. By noon, I got my first message from a local newspaper reporter, a woman named Jill Thompson, who used to write the Real People, Real Voices column. She left her number with just one sentence. I always suspected something off about Robert Clark's 1997 suspension. "If you're willing to talk, I'm here to listen." Erica read it and let out a low whistle. "You just lit a bomb," she said. I gave her a tired smile. I didn't light it. They planted the bomb long ago. I just flipped the switch. By the afternoon, my phone buzzed nonstop. Some messages were kind, "I believe you." Others were angry, "You're smearing a decent family." But I didn't waver. For the first time in my life, I wasn't speaking to be accepted. I was speaking to be real. That evening, as I folded laundry, Erica walked in holding her phone. "You should see this," she said. I took the phone. On the screen was my father's latest live stream. He was sitting in the living room, his face tired but his voice still cold and sharp. We never forced her to do anything. Maybe there were misunderstandings, but airing family matters online like this? As parents, how could anyone bear that? The comments flooded the bottom. But unlike what he was used to, this time many people pushed back. If it's just a misunderstanding, why are all the bills in her name? A good dad doesn't need a live stream to prove he's a good dad. One comment had been voted to the top. When a controller loses power, they start pretending to be the victim. I turned off the phone and set it on the table. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt real, like the truth was finally pushing back the shadows. I knew there was more to come, both good and bad, but that night I sat at my computer, typed the final paragraph of my post, and for the first time, I allowed myself to say this. If your sacrifices have ever been denied by your own family, if you've ever been made to feel invisible, if you've ever carried the weight of a household only to be called ungrateful, I hope you know you're not alone. I've been there too. Share your story under this post. Maybe our circumstances differ, but in the silence we've all swallowed, some pain echoes the same. And if you'd like to walk this road with me, follow this page. Share the post if it resonates with you, and don't hesitate to leave a message. Someone might need it more than you know. I reread it one last time, then clicked update. Then I sat there in Erica's warm little kitchen, listening to the wind slip through the doorframe, and I felt something strange. It didn't feel like I had ended something. It felt like I had opened a new chapter, in my own name, with my own voice. I thought that once the truth came to light, once the community began to question my parents' version of events, things might settle down, or at least go quiet. But I had underestimated how desperately they'd cling to control. 3 days after I posted my story, I was served with a subpoena. It came right to Erica's apartment, delivered by a uniformed courier with a blank expression. "Are you Madeline Clark?" he asked, then handed me a thick envelope with a dark blue seal. "You've been summoned. All the details are inside." I took it, my hand freezing cold. Erica stood behind me, her voice tight. "What is it, Maddie?" I didn't answer immediately. I waited until the delivery man left, then tore open the envelope. The printed words hit me like a punch. Notice of lawsuit for defamation, slander of family, property misuse, and emotional harm to elderly individuals. Plaintiffs, Robert Clark and Eileen Clark. I read it over and over, each accusation making me feel like a stranger, as if all the years I had lived, carried, paid, and sacrificed had never existed. I couldn't even name what I was feeling. Anger, grief, or just plain numbness. Erica read through the documents, her face going pale. "They're seriously suing you?" I nodded. No smile. No tears. They won't give up. To them, me leaving was betrayal. Me speaking the truth? That's war. I sat down, opened my laptop, and started searching for legal aid. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't have money for a big firm, but I had evidence. And this time, I wasn't going to shrink back out of fear. I called the community legal aid office in Columbus. The woman who answered was named Karen, her voice calm, attentive. She listened to every detail I shared without interrupting. When I got to the part about being sued for property misuse, she gently cut in. "Do you have records? Bank statements, receipts, messages, paperwork, showing your name on the accounts?" "I have everything," I replied. "I've prepared it all." She paused for a second, then said, "Good. From what you've described, this sounds like retaliatory countersuing, possibly even financial abuse in reverse. In some cases, when an adult child is exploited over a long period without clear agreements, it can qualify as reverse financial exploitation." I couldn't breathe for a moment. All this time, I had just thought I was treated badly. I never dared to name it. But now, someone had said it out loud. I had been exploited. Karen guided me through how to file a formal response with the court, provided me with a sample template, and connected me with a volunteer attorney experienced in sensitive family litigation. We scheduled a follow-up discussion for the coming days. I hung up and sat still for a long while. Erica walked in, handed me a glass of water, then sat across from me. "You okay?" she asked. I looked up at her and nodded slightly. "Ah!" "Yeah, I'm all right. Everything feels more real than it's ever been." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the dim lights flickering across the empty street. One question kept echoing in my mind. Why would they do this? It's not that I didn't know the answer. It just hurt too much to accept it. Because if they admitted I was the one who sacrificed, they'd have to face themselves. But they didn't want that. They would rather destroy me than let others see they weren't who they claimed to be. The next morning, my phone rang again. This time, it was a voicemail from my mother. Her voice trembled, softer than I'd heard in years. Sweethearts, your father's getting weaker by the day. You know he has high blood pressure. What you're doing? It's hurting all of us. We're family. Why would you put our private matters out there like this? I didn't reply. But deep down, I knew exactly why she was calling. It wasn't out of love. It was fear. She was scared I might win. That afternoon, Erica placed a small envelope on the table. I wasn't sure if I should show you this earlier, she said. Inside was a printed post from our town's social media group where my father had shared a new message. In it, he wrote, "Our daughter is trying to ruin the lives of two aging parents after we raised her with nothing but love. We need your support to survive this nightmare." I held the paper, my eyes scanning every deceitful line. I didn't feel angry, just a slow-burning clarity. He wasn't my father anymore. He was a man fighting to save the role he'd been performing for over 30 years. I set the paper down and looked straight at Erica. "I'm going to counter-sue. I'm behind you," she said without hesitation. "And if you need a witness, I'm in." I nodded, then picked up a pen and my case folder. I started recording every detail, every dollar, every message, not for revenge, but to bring everything into the light, legally, clearly, and decisively. And in my heart, I thought, if they think suing me will make me back down, they never really knew who I was. I filed my counterclaim on a Monday morning, under gray skies that threatened early snow, even though Thanksgiving hadn't yet arrived. I went with a volunteer from the legal aid office. Her name was Marissa. She was in her 40s, dark brown hair, steady voice like nothing could shake her. I sat at an old wooden table in the courthouse's public intake room, where the flickering fluorescent lights made everything feel sterile and cold. I looked down at the printed counterclaim in my hands, heart pounding. In it, I formally stated, the financial contributions I made over the past 6+ years were not misuse of property, as my parents claimed, but the result of prolonged emotional coercion and financial exploitation under the guise of family obligation. I attached full documentation, bills, statements, emails, messages, even a photo of me patching the roof in the rain, sent by a former neighbor. Marissa read it all one last time, then turned to me. "Maddie, are you ready?" I gripped the folder and nodded. "I'm not afraid anymore, just sad. For myself." We entered a small hearing room used for initial civil claims. No jury, just a judge, legal representatives, and my parents. They were already there, sitting across the room. I barely recognized my mother. She wore a gray cardigan, hair neatly pinned up, a white handkerchief in her hand. At a glance, she looked like a retired schoolteacher falsely accused by a former student. But I knew better. It was just another mask. My father was different. Same slouched posture, hands in his coat pockets, eyes scanning the room with that familiar arrogance. When he saw me walk in, the corner of his mouth curled into a mocking smile. I didn't respond. The judge was an older man, balding, silver-rimmed glasses, with a gravelly but firm voice. After procedural formalities, he asked both sides to present their summaries. My parents' attorney stood first, a man in a dark suit, slicked-back hair, practiced tone. He began with lines lifted straight from the complaint. "My clients, Mr. and Mrs. Clark, have suffered deep emotional trauma due to Miss Clark's defamatory and public accusations." Then cited excerpts from my social media post. I sat silently, hands resting in my lap, never interrupting. I didn't need to argue, I had the truth. and I had evidence. Then Marissa stood. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. She began with a line that hushed the entire room. Your Honor, has anyone ever stopped to ask if a daughter pays the electric, water, insurance, and even roof repairs for years, who's really dependent on whom? She walked through each piece of evidence clearly, every document attached. She didn't attack, didn't insult, just presented facts and let the court decide. When she showed the bank records, where my mother had taken out a loan using my name, the judge furrowed his brow. The room grew heavier. I saw my mother lower her head. My father clenched his fists, veins bulging. He wasn't used to being on the defensive, but he couldn't argue with numbers. By the end of the preliminary hearing, the judge didn't issue a ruling. Instead, he asked both parties to submit additional documents over the next 2 weeks. As we stood to leave, I caught my mother's gaze. Her eyes weren't cold. They weren't angry either. What I saw startled me. Panic. I looked at her for a moment, then turned away. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because if I paused, I might soften. And this time, I couldn't afford to soften. We stepped outside the courthouse, icy wind cutting through the marble corridor. Erica was already waiting by the car, holding 2 cups of hot coffee from the corner shop. She handed me one, her eyes quietly searching mine. I nodded gently. I'm good. Everything's heading in the right direction. Marissa gave my shoulder a reassuring pat. Next time, they'll have to explain why every household bill for the past 6 years was in the name of a so-called freeloader daughter. And I'm really curious to hear what they say about borrowing from a bank under someone else's identity. I let out a soft laugh, the first in weeks. It felt like something inside me had finally loosened. Not revenge, but the quiet strength of knowing someone had my back. Legally, transparently, and undeniably. That night, back at Erica's apartment, I sat down at the dining table and pulled out a blank sheet of paper. I wrote the first line with a steady hand. I didn't betray my family. I just refused to keep being the sacrifice. I taped it to the fridge, right next to a photo of Erica and me from our early spring picnic last year. The green of our shirts nearly matched the sky. And I realized, maybe for the first time in my life, I was truly standing on my own side. The following week, Cedar Glen slipped into a snowless winter. Cold, but not in a way you could see. The whispering at the bakery, the murmurs in church, all of it faded. In that surface-level silence, I could feel something shifting underneath. Like water moving beneath a thin layer of ice. Proof of that came the next Saturday morning when I received a text from an unknown number. I work at the bank. Can't say who I am, but your dad is trying to request a 2021 account statement under your name. Says it's to cross-check family debts. Be careful. I read the message 3 times. Each time, my grip on the phone tightened. The calm I had been working so hard to maintain felt like a paper-thin coat in a cold gust of wind. They hadn't stopped, and they wouldn't. Until I collapsed or gave up. Erica noticed my face the moment I stepped out of the room. She was sitting by the window, holding a steaming cup of coffee, soft morning light brushing against her bed-tousled hair. "What's wrong?" she asked. I sat down across from her and handed her the phone. Erica read the message, then let out a sigh. "They're trying to flip the script," she muttered. I nodded, my voice low. "I think they know they're losing the case. Now they want to bury me in financial messes or at least stall everything out. What are you going to do?" I was quiet for a few seconds, then answered. "I'm going to do what I've been avoiding. I'm cutting off all their access. For good." That same day I went to the bank. I sat across from a young banker named Marcus. He seemed to know about my story from what had been circling around town, but he remained completely professional. "I want to update every piece of security information," I said firmly. "Passwords, security questions, beneficiaries linked access, everything." Marcus typed quickly, occasionally looking up to confirm each step. I handed over documents proving I was the sole legal owner of the account. At last he looked up, eyes full of understanding. "I'll make sure they can't do anything with this account anymore, Ms. Clark." I nodded, giving him a soft smile. "Thank you. Really, thank you." As I stepped out of the bank, rain began to fall, thin but sharp, like cold needles. I pulled my coat tighter and walked slowly along the soaked sidewalk. A weariness crept into every step, not from my body, but from a mind that had been on edge far too long. I thought of the past, of winter mornings when I woke early to shovel snow from the walkway before my parents left, then quietly brewed coffee and set it on the table without ever hearing a thank you. I thought of my 27th birthday when I gave Mom a silk scarf she once admired in a store, and she just glanced at it and asked, "Where'd you get the money for this?" I thought of how I used to believe that if I just did well enough, long enough, they would change. I was wrong. When I got home, Erica was at the kitchen table with her laptop open. On the screen was an early web design, a simple site with a bold headline, "Freedom doesn't come from blood, it comes from truth." I froze. She looked up, slightly embarrassed. "I know you're not into loud statements, but I thought maybe we could do something bigger." I walked over and took a closer look. Below the title were simple sections. My story, resources, financial protection templates, a list of free legal aid organizations by state. Each link was small but specific. I turned to Erica. "Do you think anyone will care?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she showed me an email she'd received from a stranger. "Miss Maddie, I cried reading your story. I used to think I was the only daughter exploited by my own parents. Now I know I'm not crazy. I'm not alone." I read to the end and my eyes blurred, not from sadness, but because for the first time, I felt something unmistakable. My pain meant something. Not something to hold onto or hide, but something to share. That night, we sat close together at the dinner table, golden lamplight glowing over mugs of cinnamon ginger tea. I reopened my case folder, jotting down content to update, documents to copy. Erica carefully labeled folders on her laptop: main case, counterclaim, bank access records. As I cleaned up my workspace, Erica pulled a small box from the drawer and placed it in front of me. "I think you should keep this," she said. I opened it. Inside was the plastic cake topper I'd ordered for last year's birthday. The one I ended up placing on a cake I bought myself, eaten in silence, before I was kicked out without a single birthday wish. I looked up at her, words forming but left unsaid. I picked up the topper, the plastic words curved in soft script. "Happy birthday." But this time, it didn't sting. It was just a marker. A small milestone I couldn't forget, the moment I stepped out of the dutiful daughter role and into my own identity. On a chilly morning in early December, I stood in front of the new apartment I'd rented in downtown Cedar Glen. A 3-story red brick building, white wooden window frames peeling at the edges, creaky wooden hallway floors, but to me it felt like a quiet declaration. I was starting over. The key clicked in the lock and the door creaked open. Inside, it was empty, scented with old wood and lit by dusty morning sunbeams through the windows. No one on the couch to frown when I came home late. No silent accusations for buying the wrong coffee brand. No one calling me the shadow of the house. I took a deep breath. Freedom didn't smell like expensive perfume. It smelled like rotting wood, chipped paint, old wallpaper, but also like no one else had control over me anymore. I moved in little by little. A secondhand armchair from the flea market, a pine bookshelf Erica gifted me, a painting I'd made in college, still marked with a stray blot of paint in the bottom corner. None of it had much value, but each piece reminded me, I chose this life. No one chose it for me. That first night in the new apartment, I sat on the floor, back against the wall, eating noodles from the only porcelain bowl I'd brought. Outside, the city lights flickered on. I opened my laptop and logged into the website Erica and I had quietly been building. A new message popped up. I just filed to cut off my mom financially. She took out 3 loans under my name without asking. I used to think I was being ungrateful, but now I know I was just trying to save myself. Thank you, Maddie. I didn't know the sender, but I knew that feeling exactly. The one like you'd just loosened a noose that had been around your neck your whole life. I replied simply, "You're not alone." The room was still, but not like before. Not the heavy silence of someone always listening outside your door. This silence was open space, where I could breathe without asking permission. A few days later, I received an official notice from the court. My counterclaim had been approved for formal hearing, and my parents' original lawsuit was under review for potential misuse of the legal system to cause emotional harm. Marissa called me, her voice upbeat. "We're on the right track. The court doesn't grant this lightly. You've done what so many in your shoes couldn't. You kept your evidence, and you didn't respond with reckless anger." I nodded, even though I was alone in the room. What did that mean? It meant I wasn't the girl silently writing checks in the dark anymore. I was facing my past with clarity and patience. That afternoon, I walked to the thrift store down the block and picked out a few decorations: a curved iron lamp, some worn leather books, and an empty picture frame. Back home, I placed the frame on a shelf and stared at it for a long time. I knew I wouldn't put a family photo in it, but I didn't yet know what I would. Maybe, one day, I'll take a picture of myself, really smiling, and put it in that frame as a way of saying, "This is the person I chose to be." That evening, Erica came over with pizza and 2 cans of soda. She sat cross-legged on the new couch, looking around before smiling. "I've never seen you this at peace," she said. I smiled back. "Honestly, I didn't think I could feel this way again." She tilted her head. "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" I set my soda down, thinking. It's not that I haven't thought about it, but forgiveness doesn't mean going back, and it doesn't mean I owe them anything. Erica nodded. Forgiveness isn't a gift for them. Sometimes it's just the way we put the weight down. I looked out the window, headlights casting soft glows on the glass. I didn't know if I'd ever truly forgive. But I knew this. I no longer woke at night to the sound of my father's footsteps. I no longer flinched when a text came from my mother, and I no longer apologized every time I said no. That weekend, I received a handwritten letter. No return name, no return address. The envelope was roughly sealed, the handwriting shaky like someone elderly. I opened it. Inside was a short note, the writing slanted. "I live 3 houses down from the Clarks. I saw you fixing the gutter, alone last February. There was still snow on the ground. I wanted to help, but my wife was sick and I couldn't leave her. I've always felt ashamed for not speaking up. You deserve a different life. Don't ever think no one noticed." I held that letter for a long time. Those trembling lines were short, but they carried the weight of a hidden witness finally speaking out. I placed the letter in the empty frame on my shelf. Not to honor the writer, but to remind myself. Some truths don't need to be shouted to be heard. They just need to be spoken. At the right time, in the right way, and that's enough to change someone's life. I don't know if my story resembles anything you've been through, but if any part of this journey made you think of sacrifices you've made in silence, words you've swallowed, or that one moment when you chose yourself instead of pleasing others, I hope you'll share your thoughts. Because sometimes, a single sentence from you might be all someone else needs to feel a little less alone in their own family. And if you're drawn to stories that show the real edges of family, not the sugar-coated version, but the ones full of friction, conflict, heartbreak, and maybe even hope, don't forget to follow this channel. There are still many stories I want to tell so we can listen, reflect, and maybe, just maybe, find a piece of ourselves in them.